voting. And of course, over the years we see that people who do not live here and people who basically are in the diaspora, of course, they are very much interested in what is happening in St. Kitts and Nevis, although they don't live here. Now, one of the things is that when we have elections, you have a constituency. Sometimes it's one constituency that comes home. It's really a constituency out there, that come home to vote. And last election, it was highlighted so much that the opposition was so bitter that it was taken to the extreme to say that their planes were sabotaged so that the people could not get here to help them with an election victory. What is really being done to address that? I mean, you spoke about electoral reform, and I would hope that electoral reform will address that concern. That somehow you have to be living in the country for a period of time or something. You just don't fly in to vote, and then you fly back, and that's it.
I think this is a question for the people, and one in which, as I say, as we move forward with the reform process, electoral as well as constitutional, that through town hall meetings, to discussions, not just with those residents, but those in the diaspora, that the people of St. Kitts and Nevis would have be able to come and determine what type of democracy that we do have. Those who fly in to vote under our current constitution are entitled to do so. The constitution provides for someone who is said to be domiciled in St. Kitts and Nevis to determine that they can choose to come and vote. That's a constitutional right that they do have.
Yes.
So at this point in time, that is what adheres. There had been what I would call a lacuna in the law, a gap, that people who lived overseas would come and register to vote anywhere where they wanted to vote. But there was an amendment back in 2009 that determined that if you were born in St. Kitts and last lived in a particular location, constituents, and you went overseas, and you had not registered to vote before you left, you can't just come back and register anywhere. You had to come back and register where you last lived.
Yes.
That is clearly stated in the thing. So that had been sort of clarified. There are other much more serious, I shouldn't say more serious, because if there are infractions in the electoral process, they're all very serious. But some of the vexing questions that we have in relation to electoral process is that where people register is not always where they're resident. And that is why the question of residence is going to be a fundamental discussion in any electoral reform process. I think there had been the general feeling that if I lived in Greenlands and I registered to vote in Greenlands, I now moved to Frigate Bay, that I could go back and continue to vote in Greenlands, that somehow it was acceptable. The law does not, as it stands right now, demand that you do something about it. But if somebody objects to you doing that, you have to move your name. There are those other situations where somebody may never have lived in Greenlands. They may have lived in outlying constituency, and they come and register in Bastille. And so that too is a vexing question. And the electoral reform process that we would want to have started early in the new year will address that type of vexing question, the question of whether we will entertain an overseas vote or not, whether we have an overseas constituency, as you say, or how we manage an overseas voter. They're on the voters list, maybe, but they must be resident for X number of months before a poll. It may require, for instance, a fixed
What about
date.
voting out there?
There's all of those questions, but as I say, those are questions for people to determine. It may be that we have to establish a fixed date for the poll. This is a particular authority that the Prime Minister has to pick whenever it is, and it would be also like term limits, very revolutionary
Type
of
the presidential system of the US
that-
has it.
well, a certain amount of certainty.
Yes.
So that if, for instance, you're going to have a particular day, the 1st of December, for instance, to be the day when you would have an election every 5 years, somebody has to be resident 6 months before the 1st of December. Otherwise, you can't vote. So there are various options that would be put to people, and people would have other options that they would like to compete with those type of provisions. But the process of governance, of restoring a democracy, is something that 30 odd years after independence, we need to revisit, as we need to do over time. Revisit the Constitution and have for us what is a proper democratic system where that the citizens do not feel that they've been shortchanged, that they are people who are somehow
Yes.
flying in the face of the Constitution
Yes.
and doing things that are illegal or wrong. I should point out this happens the world over, that the constitutions are not cast in stone. From time to time, there are amendments. I think the American Constitution has some 20-something amendments to it, and some of them very powerful amendments. So it's something for us in this administration to take very seriously. We will be taking it very seriously. It is a promise that we have made, and we have begun to put these things in place. As I said, freedom of information, now term limits. We'll be doing integrity in public life and other such governance issues that will strengthen our country and our democracy.